Well, hello, everyone. Today we are joined by Mary Grove and Brett Brohl, managing partners at Bread and Butter Ventures, a new national venture fund based in Minneapolis-Saint Paul that will invest in high-growth startups. Mary and Brett are close and longtime partners with Greater MSP, and they're both recognized leaders in our region's innovation ecosystem, and they've played many roles. So welcome to you both.
Thanks, Peter. Thanks for having us.
Great to see you.
Good to be here.
Maybe you could start by just giving us a minute of background on how each of you found your way to Minneapolis-Saint Paul and the work that you've done here and you are doing here.
Brett, you have longer tenure in Minnesota. You want to kick us off?
I moved to Minnesota in 2009. I was a trailing spouse, so I followed my wife. My wife got a job with General Mills out of business school, and I was an entrepreneur. So I was a entrepreneur that had a workforce that was remote, and which just meant it was me and one other person at the time, and so I could go anywhere. And we actually picked Minnesota over New York City. So it was she had two offers, and so we decided to come out to Minnesota. And to be honest, we're going to be there for 3 years, and we'll probably move back to the East Coast. And we're both from the East Coast originally. And here we are 11 years later with a couple of Minnesotan-born children and a house, and we're in it for the long haul. I've worn a variety of different hats since I've been here. I was an entrepreneur for the first portion of my time in Minnesota. Up until about 2015, I was running my own startup and had a little bit of success there, both venture-backed startups and also startups that I bootstrapped with my own money. And in end of 2015, moved to the investment side of the world and helped spin up the Techstars Retail Accelerator, which was in partnership with Target. At about the same time, I also started the first iteration of Bread and Butter Ventures, which at the time was called the Syndicate Fund, which is an early stage venture capital fund. And then in 2017, I had the opportunity or the idea to do a food tech accelerator, and was able to convince Techstars to let me try and put this crazy idea together here in Minnesota, and was able to build the Techstars Farm to Fork Accelerator, which we partnered with Cargill and Ecolab on. And that's been a tremendous experience, and that's still an ongoing thing. And I do that at the same time as we work on Bread and Butter Ventures. Mary and I both wear a variety of hats still today. I've also been really involved and have had the privilege to be on the Forge North board, which I think we'll talk a little bit more about today, and a variety of other boards and community, entrepreneurial community, events and organizations that try and help startups and founders. And Mary and I actually met through one of her programs in a nonprofit that her and her husband Steve started called Silicon North Stars. And so I've been privileged to be a part of that and help in a really small way. Then I'll let Mary talk a little bit more about that.
Great. So hello to everyone. I am perhaps a newer face in our community. I moved to Minnesota a little over 2 years ago in spring of 2018, and it's been a really amazing experience thus far. But my background is primarily in tech and entrepreneurship. So my first lens of entrepreneurship was really through my family. My parents were entrepreneurs who immigrated here from Thailand. They grew up in villages without electricity and moved here, raised 3 children, started and ran small businesses together for 30 years. And it gave me just such a foundational appreciation for the grit and tenacity that entrepreneurship requires. And so I studied at Stanford University, so I was right in the backyard of the Bay Area, accidentally stumbled into tech through that, and so spent the first 15 years of my career at Google, which was an amazing experience. I started on the IPO deal team when we went public, so I was very excited to see the Jamf IPO a couple of weeks ago and see another great tech exit from right here in Minnesota. Then I did early stage product and new business development for about 6 years. And then my last 6 years, I started and ran the Google for Startups effort, which is the company's umbrella for investing in startups and startup ecosystems in more than 100 countries. And so I have a great love for working with early stage entrepreneurs, and also for the notion that it's not just happening in Silicon Valley. And so that was part of the genesis of moving here. I moved here with my family. My husband, Steve, is a proud Minnesota native from Northfield. That's our dog, Charger, in the background, if you can hear him. But we also moved here, one was our belief about where's the future of the innovation economy going to be written. And we believe that's not going to be on the coast. And then personally, we had 1-year-old twins who are now 3.5 and wanted to raise them as part of this community and make this our home. So I started venture investing at the time as a partner at Revolution on the Rise the Rest seed fund, and led about 25 investments there across a variety of verticals. Healthcare and enterprise software were two of the big ones, and learned that there's a remarkable opportunity in the middle of the country, and I love it here. So with that, the other hat that I wear is the nonprofit. Brett mentions the Silicon North Stars is a nonprofit that Steve and I started back in 2013. And our mission is about educating and inspiring young Minnesota kids, specifically from economically underserved backgrounds, towards futures in tech. And that lens of running that organization from California gave me enough appreciation for what was happening here, the potential in Minnesota, to make the leap of faith. And so we've been running that program for 7 years. It's going strong. We have 120 youth in our program who we're extremely proud of, especially for the leadership role that they are playing right now, in their families, in the community, in the broader conversation and fight around racial equity. So it's a fascinating time. But all that said, as my family and I made the decision that we're long for Minnesota, it was such a natural opportunity and partnership to team up with Brett. We've been working together on the ground as investors for 2 years. I'm also fortunate to be on the Forge North Council and tackle some of these goals at the community level, and just really excited to team up to build the next chapter, really with this place-based thesis of Minnesota Rocks.
So a couple of amazing stories, and we are so fortunate to have both of you in this community and focus on accelerating the growth and success of the startup ecosystem in our region, which is an essential part of the regional economic development strategy. And that's why we've been tracking key measures of startup success on the regional indicator dashboard, and why we've worked together over the past several years to build Forge North, which you both mentioned, an initiative that was launched last year, focused on building the strength of the region's innovation ecosystem. And increasing access to growth capital for startups in this region has been one of the areas of focus for Forge North, and is an area that's been changing rapidly in 2020 as a result of COVID-19. And maybe contrary to what people would expect, despite all the change and uncertainty in the broader economy, big investments continue to be made across the US. And Forge North is having success creating new relationships with venture capital firms across the country because they're having to get creative about how they source deals. But we're really excited to talk with you both about a new VC fund that's being raised right here in MSP. So tell us the story of the Bread and Butter Fund. What is it? And why did you decide to team up to create it now?
We're like, who's gonna go? Because we both could talk for hours on this topic. So Bread and Butter, as you noted, Peter, we're an early stage VC firm that's focused on investing globally, so in the best companies anywhere in the world, but really with a very deliberate Minnesota home field advantage strategy. So the idea is, why bread and butter? Of course, one of the nicknames, many nicknames for our great state of Minnesota, but also, we believe that what are the bread and butter or the backbone sectors of the modern economy? We believe those are food tech and ag tech, health tech, and enterprise software. And it's no accident that those three sectors map 100% to Minnesota's strengths, right? So the thesis of our fund is investing in the best companies in the world, leaning forward into these three verticals, and supporting them with the connective infrastructure that we have here in Minnesota. So think about that seamless connection back into industry from a capital perspective, from the opportunity to have pilot and commercial partnerships, for the opportunity to have expertise and knowledge sharing with these industries and these leaders, and then ultimately a path to M&A, right? A path to exit. And that creates this virtuous flywheel where innovation can really thrive. And so that's the thesis of our fund. And, the evolution is Brett has built a phenomenal fund with what was the syndicate fund. We are teaming up now on the evolution of that fund. So all of those portfolio companies, 35 investments, proud to call Bread and Butter companies. And then as we look to the future with our next fund that we're working on together, how do we continue to expand, invest, and grow that work and grow economic prosperity, based here in our home state?
Awesome.
Yeah, and I'd add that another unique thing about the fund is we have Steph Rich, who's our third partner, right? Who's not on the call with us today, and she's our director of platform, or head of platform and it's and a lot of what she's working on is how do we tie in the community, how do we also provide value to the community that we're in as well, through our platform and through bringing entrepreneurs to work with a variety of, whether it's enterprise or other expertise that we have here in Minnesota. And so we're really excited to be working with Steph, and it's fairly unique for an early stage venture fund like ours, somebody that invests at seed stage, so really early stage companies, to have a full blown out platform to support the community we're in, and also to support the founders that come through our portfolio. And I would say that while we do invest anywhere in the world, more than 20% of our investments to date have been in Minnesota-based startups. And so it's the highest percentage of any geolocation that we have in our portfolio. So we do want and expect to get pitched and invest in lots more Minnesota-based startups. So I think Mary says it great. She's like, we want to be the front door for Minnesota startups as well. We want to make sure that we're talking to all the great founders that we have here in the state.
Well, I think hopefully people heard that. That was kind of an invitation, open door.
Well, a plug on that front, actually. So one of the things we do, every member of our team does open office hours once a week. You can find the link off our website, which is breadandbutterventures.com. But we truly do want to hear from you, and that you can set up time to talk with any of us about anything. It could be to pitch a company, it could be just to get advice, talk about venture, to ask about literally anything. So that opportunity the door is open, so to speak.
I've had conversations about like applications for school. It's so funny like what we end up talking about. I go into it thinking that we're just going to talk about like getting pitched, and man, we talk about all kinds of stuff in those meetings. It's a lot of fun.
How big of a fund are we talking about?
So the new fund will have, we expect the new fund to be at least $25 million fund. So that'll be the fund 3, where fund 3 will land. So yeah, and we're excited to be able to deploy that, and we'll deploy that over, for our first investments, probably a 2.5-3 year period, and then we'll continue to follow and continue to invest in companies for another 3 years. So we'll deploy that fund over 6 years, but you should expect to see a fund 3 and then a fund 4 and a fund 5. That beyond that, Mary and I want to build a world-class fund that's headquartered here in Minnesota, that is name brand, that it is a fund that every founder, regardless of where you're from or what stage you're at, wants to have on their cap table. So you call it whatever you want, a tier 1 fund, but we have big visions for what we're building, and we're excited to do it together.
If we think about this as a new kind of strategic asset in the broader ecosystem, let's think 5 years ahead. This has been wildly successful. You've outperformed everything you set to do. What kind of impact would you hope to see on kind of the broader innovation community?
Yeah, so 5 years out, it's a really great question. 5 years out, from a personal fund perspective, we hope that, we've deployed all the initial investments out of that fund, that they're doing well, they're starting to raise their next rounds. We're likely have raised our next fund at that point as well. Again, really long-term trajectory and vision here for what we can do. From an ecosystem perspective, it's our hope that Bread and Butter literally helps put the bread and butter state on the map globally, that everybody understands these unique assets that we have in our region that we on this call know well, but really aren't touted to the extent they should be. So can we be the epicenter of that innovation? And then from a community perspective, we very deeply want to be a part of creating and opening up access to a very diverse pipeline of entrepreneurs. And we think about diversity and inclusion on our team at every layer of that stack. So who are the LPs or limited partners who invest in a venture fund? Who are the people on the team who make investment decisions and support the company? Once we invest in the company, how do we support them in hiring and retaining and supporting diverse talent? How do we help them think about who's on their board, who's on their cap table, which just means capitalization table, who owns what percentage of the company? And so that's something that our team's heavily focused on. So our vision is 5 years from now, we're having a very different conversation. And I think the broader racial equity discussions that are being driven out of Minnesota are, in our minds, that exact opportunity to be that turning point. And we couldn't feel more passionately about this work period, but to be able to execute on it in the time that we're living in, both with COVID-19, and the fight for racial justice, it is just more urgent than ever.
When the scale of the fund and the focus of the fund, but with that transformational vision is one of the reasons this is really important to the whole region. and important to Forge North. So on that, which we've mentioned a few times, you both serve on the Leadership Council of Forge North. And this year, the Leadership Council set some bold goals for the whole region in the areas of early stage capital, racial equity, and corporate to startup connections. Can you talk about what needs to be done to achieve our goal of doubling the number of startup companies raising early stage capital?
I can jump in with a few thoughts. You know, there's it's interesting. There's always this like, what happens first, the chicken or egg? Is the capital there for the companies first, or is there enough companies being formed that are investable, right? And the answer is probably both, right? So to be able to invest in twice as many companies as we haven't historically, we need more companies founded, right? And so one thing that anybody that's listening to this or watching this, I would encourage you to take that leap of faith, right? To start doing it, to start working on whatever that idea that you might have. It's not as scary as it might seem, and I know it is sometimes tough to take that jump, but there's ways to ease into it, right? So we need people to start, you know, whether it's nights and weekends, like hacking on an idea that they have until they get it to a point where they can get more comfortable with taking and going full time, where they can become investable. There are, you know, what Launch MN has been doing, you know, which is a partner of the Forge North community, and they're doing some, you know, early stage grant work where you can get some early seed money that is non-dilutive, which maybe that'll be enough to get you to go full time and jump in and dive in and start working on your company full time. So, you know, there's already a couple things in place that are helping move us there. I think that don't let capital, you know, don't let the fact that there's not a lot of venture funds in Minnesota be a reason not to do something, right? If you build something great and you're working on something that's amazing, the money's going to be there for you. There's enough venture capital in this world, trust me, there's a lot of it. And so to me, it's a bit of moving people to just taking that faith, and I've done it. It's hard, but we need more startups to come out. And there's a tremendous number of support organizations in Minnesota now, which is very different from 5 years ago. And that's thanks to a lot of hard work from a lot of different people. But there's a tremendous number of support organizations from Forge North, but I can name several that. So go find that support organization that can help you and start getting involved as a founder. That's one place that my head goes, is let's get the people from some of these major corporations to go start that next thing.
I think that's a really great point of view. And I would add to that, you know, my sort of invitation or call to action would be, whatever role you play in the ecosystem, we can all contribute to that goal of doubling the number of early stage startups funded in Minnesota. And the way to do that is think about, you know, whatever your capacity or your role could be. So for example, if you were sitting on, you know, capital that you're investing maybe in private equity or real estate, consider venture capital as a viable asset class. It's riskier, but it has higher opportunity for outsized returns when it goes well. So think about, you know, maybe you want to become an angel investor and get involved directly. Maybe you want to invest in venture funds that are being created and driven locally. Maybe you want to start actually doing venture investing through a family office. So that's one type of role. If you are in a corporation and you're not ready to take the leap that, you know, that Brett described and become the entrepreneur, think about getting closer to innovation. So think about, can you be sponsoring great efforts in our community, like Startup Week? Can you do some of the grant giving? Can you create a program, an innovation program within the corporation? Could you partner with venture funds, you know, ours and all the other ones in town, to support them from an expertise perspective, or give startups the opportunity to actually work with companies at that early of a stage? When it's time to grow your team, you know, can you think about acqui-hiring or acquiring technologies from our own ecosystem? Because again, we really need that virtuous cycle to continue. We need to have the success points and the proof points that can show companies that, hey, I don't need to move to Silicon Valley or New York to have an exit or to really go global. And so that's my hope, is no matter what role you play in the ecosystem today, you can have a tangible impact immediately.
When we're talking a lot about ecosystem, and you're kind of making the case that everybody's got a role and we kind of win big when we play together. Through your leadership in Forge North, both of you, you've helped build a roundtable of more than 20 of your peers throughout the state, active venture capital investors that meet quarterly to share best practices and strengthen relationships. And much like the rest of our region's startup ecosystem, this community has really grown in the past few years, Brett, as you mentioned, with a number of new active funds, but still most people don't know much about the venture community. So can you tell us about the educational series the group launched through Forge North earlier this year?
Yeah, we've been getting together as a group for probably just over a year, 2 years now, as an active investor community, and we wanted it to, and we started talking about how can we actually proactively help or support the community, and with not just the investments that we make, right? Because sometimes investors get heads down and they focus on their portfolio, and there's a reason for that, right? Like they are incented to try and help their portfolio companies, but as a group, we wanted to try and do more. And how do we help the community here in a way that's scalable, where we can reach as many people? So it's not just an hour of office hours on a Friday, which isn't super scalable, right? And so we decided to launch an educational series and do it from an investor perspective. So how do we help the founders in Minnesota and in our region level up a little bit? So how can we provide them with information that when they go pitch their company to an investor, or when they try and raise that first round of capital, they try and go sell their product to their first enterprise, how do we help them level up a little bit just from all of the things that we see from our experience in our network? And so we decided to launch the educational series. Mary and I led the first one together, and we've done a couple of sessions now. We actually are going to have our third iteration coming up here in the next 2 months, and we're actually bringing in a local founder that's going to partner with one of the investors and talk about how money flows from the people that invest in venture funds all the way to a founder. Then almost you have the ability to potentially create that virtuous cycle that Mary's talked about, where money then flows back into the ecosystem. And so it's just a great way that we're trying to help educate the entrepreneurs in town, and potentially some of the people that might be interested in angel investing in town, more about the entrepreneurial ecosystem, about what it means to be a venture-backed entrepreneur, and what those types of expectations are around.
Well, and that demystification of kind of what this process is and who needs to do what at what stage is a really important value add. Well, this is really exciting. In the startup world, we love a good pitch. So let's end with that. What do you need in the next 6 months to really help Bread and Butter succeed?
I think, going back to that call to action earlier, we would love to have support at multiple levels, at all levels. We are very much focused on our place thesis. We call it the Minnesota Home Field Advantage. If you have interest in getting involved as a corporate partner, we're building an experts network where expertise is leveraged across different verticals, different functional areas to support entrepreneurs. If you're interested in just mentoring, getting involved, if you're interested in co-investing and seeing some of the great companies that we're seeing, we would love the opportunity to work with all of you. And then last, but of course not least, if you're a great founder building a great team, we would love to hear from you.
Fantastic. It's so great to talk with you both. This is a big idea that the region needs, and we're really thankful for your leadership. Thanks for talking today.
Thanks so much, Peter. And we can't thank you enough for all that Greater MSP is doing to really champion and advocate for this work. So thank you for having us.
We do it. All right. Thanks so much.
See you.